With just hours away until the launch of Black Myth Wukong, we have a good number of updates to go over, including the title's release schedule, PS5 edition updates, some DLC news, and tons more to go over. Before we get into all that, I'd like to congratulate Juan H for being the winner of the Black Myth Wukong Digital Deluxe Edition giveaway. Thank you all so much for participating in the giveaway, and I encourage you to test your luck in the other giveaways I've got going on, linked in the description if they are of any interest to you. Let me know in the comments what other kinds of giveaways you'd like me to have on the channel, and who knows, maybe that next big game you've been keeping your eye on may just end up in your hands from one of my future giveaways. Alright, with that out of the way, a lot has been happening with Black Myth Wukong, from the reviews to the PS5 version, DLC info, and more, all dominating the discourse. But let's first get into the title's release schedule, because for those who have pre-ordered the game, it looks like you only have a few more hours of waiting until you can boot up the title. Just a heads up, a lot of new gameplay has been released for Black Myth from the reviewers, and just know that I will not be using their footage here so as to prevent spoiling those who don't want to see that stuff before we get to play the game. All footage here is from official footage provided by developer Game Science, so rest assured you won't be getting any spoilers here in this video. Developer Game Science recently posted a global launch graphic outlining when the game would officially become playable, with the game launching at approximately 10 AM local time in China. The graphic outlines when the title will become available in accordance with other locations around the world, so pay particular attention to your time zone if you'd like to boot up the game as soon as the title unlocks worldwide. It's awesome to see this game feature a global launch, and I hope more games opt to do this in the future, but let me know in the comments, provided you've pre-ordered the game or have the intention to pre-order Black Myth Wukong, if you're gonna boot up the game when the game unlocks. Okay, a lot of attention has been hitting the PS5 version of Black Myth Wukong, as its absence from the reviews and hands-on impressions with that version has left many PS5 players concerned over the quality of that version, and understandably so. Considering many reviewers who have played the PC version have claimed that the title's performance and bugs are, at most, relatively noticeable, the complete lack of hands-on time with the PS5 version has led many to believe that the PS5 version may be inadequate, and that developer Game Science may be withholding the title from reviewers so that it wouldn't affect the game's review score ahead of launch. While we still don't have any hands-on impressions of the title, Game Science has released about a minute and a half of footage of the PS5 version that includes footage of a boss fight, and well, it looks pretty great here. Let me know what you all think about this footage here on screen, but it looks like the frame rate seems to be stable while pumping out the great visuals that we've seen consistent with the trailers showcasing the PC gameplay. It's worth putting out there that this post from Black Myth Insider on X at Ignus the Wise has stated that the PS5 version is apparently well optimized and will contain two gameplay modes, with one prioritizing 4K visuals at 30 FPS, with the game's performance mode achieving 60 FPS at 1440p. Whether or not these two modes are, in fact, in the game is to be seen, but this small snippet of gameplay provided by Game Science for the PS5 version is hopefully indicative of what players may get with the console version. In addition to the PS5 version's performance, it has been stated by some reviewers that the Steam Deck performs remarkably well, with the device able to reliably hit frame rates around 40 FPS, while rarely dipping as low as 25 FPS. For those interested in playing Black Myth Wukong on the go on the Steam Deck, Dexerto released their recommended specifications for that device here, noting that the title exceeded performance expectations with some slight modifications with the game's settings. Considering the Steam Deck can play this game at a good standard, considering it is a portable device, it's likely that the PS5 version will be able to achieve much better results considering the hardware. But we'll just have to see when the title launches in a few hours. For the PS5 players out there, let me know in the comments if you're worried about the lack of PS5 coverage of the game and whether or not you may hold off on picking up the title. Do you like photo modes? Well, it has been confirmed, according to Touch Arcade's review of the game, that Black Myth Wukong does indeed contain a photo mode. According to the review, the photo mode comes packed with a number of solid features that are industry standard with these modes, with the photo mode letting you, quote, adjust FOV, roll, depth of field, brightness, contrast, vignette, use many filters, toggle headgear, toggle stains on body, use frames, add a logo sticker, sticker position, sticker size, etc. In a game focusing on ancient Chinese mythology with a title showcasing as high a fidelity as it gets in the graphics department these days, having a photo mode is a big plus for those wishing to capture some of the game's many incredible moments. And speaking of these moments, the reviews that have been published so far indicate that Black Myth is indeed a great game. Again, absolutely no spoilers here, as I just want to go over the key takeaways that the reviewers had with their time with Black Myth Wukong. Here, we are going over somewhat of a TLDR approach to summarize the key takeaways the reviewers had about the game, as we will first discuss what these reviewers liked about the title before addressing the game's criticism. Alright, so first, the good stuff, and there is quite a bit here. The reviewers unanimously agreed that the game just looks incredible, showcasing the absolute best of what Unreal Engine 5 is capable of pulling off. Special praise was brought to the title's variety in the landscapes, enemy designs, and boss battles, as many reviewers claimed that the game truly feels like an epic journey where something new is constantly around the corner, whether that be a new environment, a new enemy type, and of course, a new boss battle. These boss battles in particular were seen as perhaps the game's greatest strength, as a title sporting more than 80 boss fights actually contains boss fights that are unique from one another, and while a select few of these boss battles are said to be repeat battles with other foes, that these fights include additional attacks and transformations that set them apart from the earlier encounters had with them. In addition, reviewers like the way that Sun Wukong controls, with the Monkey King reportedly being very agile and responsive that felt just right, with few reviewers finding fault with frustrating character moments that felt jarring, except for one issue that we'll bring up when covering the negatives. The gameplay and difficulty is also said to feel right at home for an action game, featuring a challenge to overcome that isn't too extreme, with the greatest difficulty resulting in some of the optional boss encounters. While the game solely features only one difficulty, reviewers enjoyed how unpunishing the game is, with frequent checkpoints before each boss fight, including being able to start the boss fight after a boss transformation if the player were to die mid-fight, with no penalty to experience points upon death, and with the ability to respec at any moment. This title is definitely more forgiving than most out there. The RPG mechanics were also greatly praised, with intuitive skill trees that allow players to have some variation in playstyle. The variety of magic spells in the game, like the powerful Immobilize spell, and variety of transformations that the player can morph into, received much praise as well. Reviewers also praised the game's story, remarking that the title's cinematic representation of classic Chinese mythological creatures and the title's interpretation of Journey to the West was relatively easy to follow along. Other things like the game including an absolute treasure trove of secrets, like optional boss fights, NPCs, and loot in hidden areas, promoted a great deal of exploration for those wanting to unearth all the game's secrets. This leads to general praise in the game's level design, as the general openness of many of the game's levels, especially after Chapter 1, provided a sense of scale and adventure that wasn't advertised in the trailers prior to the release of the game. The game also contains a photo mode, as we discussed earlier, and includes numerous endings, with the average game length reported to last around 30 to 45 hours, depending on how thorough players are in exploring the game's large levels. With New Game Plus included, multiple endings, and an incredible amount of secrets to be had, most reviewers felt compelled to replay the game after their initial playthrough, greatly adding more time to the title. Now for the negatives. In talking about the game's level design, the biggest issue reviewers had was the lack of any sort of map for these larger levels. This was a pretty big complaint, but I guess the lack of a map kind of plays into the favor of this game feeling more or less like a grand adventure, one of the game's biggest strengths, right? Also, while the game contains a jump button, reviewers felt that this action was incredibly underutilized, especially in combat, as Sun Wukong doesn't sport much of an arsenal of aerial attacks, and the jump button instead is largely relegated to platforming sections. With these larger levels, reviewers noted a ton of invisible walls that were placed in areas that felt unnatural at points. In addition, while there are a lot of items to pick up and gear to collect, reviewers noted that it would be in the game's best interest to give players better visual identifiers to help the player know what is collectible, as many of the collectibles camouflage a bit too well with the game's environments. There were also said to be some difficulty spikes with only a couple of boss encounters, although most reviewers claimed that this largely rested in a few optional boss fights. The biggest negative about the title, and largely the one responsible for the lower scores on Metacritic, were the game's bugs and performance problems. While performance absolutely seemed to vary depending on the review, some reviewers claimed to have inconsistent performance with frame rates even with good rigs. Bugs were also pretty common, with IGN reporting that Sun Wukong fell through the map during a boss fight, and with numerous other publications reporting game crashes and freezes. These aren't necessarily uncommon in new game releases these days, unfortunately, but I'm sure Game Science will be actively trying to smooth out these issues in the coming days and weeks to ensure a good experience for most players. Also, some artifacts and items that can be examined were only presented in Mandarin instead of localized languages, so of course they're gonna have to fix that. Some reviewers also felt that the story, while featuring compelling characters like the incredible boss roster, weren't given enough time to shine, as many of these bosses and their motivations and presence in the story would be introduced right before their fight, and once disposed of, were largely never explored again. While there are some more positive and negative points made about the game, reviewers generally had an awesome time with the title, as its sitting Metacritic score is a respectable one at that, even surpassing some recent action games that are well beloved within the generation, including the excellent Stellar Blade and the supremely underrated Lies of P. Now, with that out of the way, let me know what you think about these review scores in the comments and whether these reviews have any sort of influence on your desire to pick up this game around launch. Now, this game is undoubtedly going to be a huge success for Game Science, and as a small indie developer, this is really quite the accomplishment, and because of this accomplishment and sales that the game is on track to receive, Chinese Game Insider on X at Lunatic Ignus, as per a Reddit post, reported that DLC would happen for the title should the game sell enough copies. Lunatic reported a few weeks ago that DLC was in the works for Black Myth Wukong, and that after the DLC gets completed, that Game Science will work on 2 other Black Myth games that were trademarked back in 2021. If you'd like to learn more about these 2 additional Black Myth games, consult this video here, and let me know your thoughts on Black Myth Wukong in the comments. I will continue covering the game and any updates the title receives in the future, so for those who intend to play the game in the next few hours, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll be seeing all you good people real soon in the next one.